Hello everyone, this is Paul from DLT Trading, and today I'm going to show you how to disassemble and replace some parts on a Hinderer knife. So this particular knife is the XM-18 3.5 inch version, which is the knife with the most widest range of parts available to it. So we'll go over the tools that you're going to need. So you are going to need a 5/64 hex bit, and I will be using the one that is included in the Hinderer Armorer's tool. Comes with the 5/64 bit. You don't have to have the Armorer's tool, but I'm going to show you why it's handy in a second. So we're going to use this bit. On the back side here is a very large flathead screwdriver, and there is a spanner wrench on this side, which we'll go over in just a minute here. Other tools: number 1, Phillips driver. The number 3 is a little bit too large. You can get by with the number 0. It's a little bit loose in the screws that hold the clip and filler tab on those. So the number 1 is the best way to go, but the number 0 will work in a pinch as long as you're careful not to strip the screws out. And lastly, we're going to need a small hex bit. This happens to be in a Benchmade folding tool kit here, because it is the only place that I could find a small hex here. So on the Benchmade package, it's listed as a 1/20th of an inch, just because they don't list anything in decimal. If you're looking for it, though, it's going to be most often labeled as a 0.050 inch, so a 50 thou hex driver. This is going to be for the screw on the Lockbar Stabilizer. So back to the Armorer's tool. So you can use, for the most part, standard tools that you have in your garage, in your shop, whatever the case may be. So you don't necessarily have to buy the Hinderer Armorer's tool. The thing that's nice is the spanner wrench here. It's on the back of the pivot, so the actual pivot nut on the back here, you can see the spanner wrench fits perfectly in there. There are certainly guys out there that have taken a wide flat blade screwdriver and notched the center out to get the similar look to this. So you can have a do-it-yourself solution. This just makes it easier. So either use this or fab something up yourself, but that's the basic tools you need, so nothing over the top here. So what we're going to do today on this knife is replace every replaceable part on here. So we are going to do the pivot, the scale screws, the standoffs, the Lockbar Stabilizer, and we're going to do a scale swap to a titanium. And I should take that back, so we're not going to swap everything. We're not going to do a filler tab and clip, but these are replaceable too. And then we'll remove this, and I'll show you how to do that. So let's get started here. So first off, I learned this tip from Sean. He assembles many of the knives at the Hinderer factory. Is just take the clip off. Since we're not going to replace it, I'm still going to take it off. We do need to take it off to replace the Lockbar Stabilizer, but if you're not touching the Lockbar Stabilizer on your knife, I would still recommend removing the clip, and I'll show you why. So just our number 1 screwdriver, and we're going to take these and put them to the side. So the reason for doing this is so it can lay flat, so it's going to come in handy to be able to lay this down, so just so it's not rocking. And one of the other things I wanted to note, basically put this on any hard flat surface, so kitchen countertop, kitchen table, desk, whatever you're going to be working on. But I wouldn't recommend doing this in your lap. You know, if you're bored at work on lunch in your car or something like that, it's not going to be the ideal solution. So it's nice to have a flat surface, because I've fiddled around with knives before, not particularly a Hinderer, in my lap, you know, on a couch at home, and it just doesn't turn out great. So this way you're not going to lose any parts, and you have a nice hard surface to work on. So we're going to crack the pivot screw here. So there is a small dab of blue Loctite on the pivot, so the first turn might be a little bit harder, but with it being blue, it is temporary Loctite and not permanent like red. So, and at the end, I don't have any Loctite here, so I will have to put a dab on here, but I would recommend putting a small dab of blue Loctite on the pivot screw once you replace it. So turn it just nice and tight, and with the Hinderer Armorer's tool, there's no play in the pivot, so it does fit perfect. So just be careful if you're using just one of those fat stubby screwdrivers that you commonly see in toolboxes. just be careful not to, not to scratch up your knife, because you spent a lot of your hard-earned money on it, so you don't want to scratch it up if you can avoid it. And just as a note, I am being careful on the backside to just have the spanner wrench and not having this touching where I could possibly scratch the lock face, so I'm paying attention to hold it just right, so just the head of the spanner wrench is in the nut side of the pivot. Alright, so we're right at the end here, getting the pivot out. And just take your time and be careful, like I said before, and then you can twist this out. Alright, so we got the pivot screw out, clip off, and now we're going to go to the handle screws here. So this is where the 564 hex bit is going to come in handy. Fits perfectly into the screws. Alright, so just make sure you got them screwed all the way out. Alright, and since we're going to replace the scale, I'm just going to leave, we're replacing the scale and the screw, so I'm just going to leave the screws right in there. So you can see here, when you get a factory G10 knife, it does have a titanium liner behind it, a color match to the lock side. So this has the battle blue liner. Alright, so from here, I'm going to take the blade a little bit. Alright, so we're also going to be replacing the nuts. So if you're not replacing the nuts, you can just take off the standoffs here, put your new standoffs on, then reverse the process. But since we're replacing the nuts, take the whole knife, pick it up, and just pop these nuts right out. Alright, so now we basically have the 3 non-replaceable parts on a Hinderer knife. So you cannot replace the blade, cannot replace the lock face, since these are mated up and ground together. So this lock face matches with this blade, and the pivot nut itself cannot be replaced. So other than that, you're free to interchange any parts that you want on the knife, as long as they're sized to fit your knife. Alright, so in this case, we're going to be putting working finish parts. So we're just going to put the nuts from the backside. And this is one of the other reasons why taking the clip off is handy, since this will sit evenly down on the table rather than, getting wonky with the pocket clip. Alright, so it's going to fit in there. And do keep in mind, the Teflon washer, since there's not much holding it on now, it did just slide off, so we're just going to make note and put that to the side just so we don't lose it. So we're also going to be putting working finish standoffs on this knife. So we just slide the standoffs down. Alright, so the titanium scale upgrade is not the most common. You guys certainly do it. We do sell the scales, but if you weren't going to do the scale, then you would reverse the process and put your liner down and then the G10 on top of it. The one thing to note, the hole up here is for the stop pin, which you can see here. So you will need to get those lined up. The first time I ever did this, I wasn't sure why it wasn't going together right. I didn't have the stop pin lined up in this hole, so just make note of that if you're putting it on here. So with doing the titanium, it does delete the scale, and you can see here there is a recess. Since this takes up the thickness of the G10 and the titanium, it has a recess for the stop pin right here. So we'll need to line that up with the stop pin. So you see the process here, putting this on here, and like I almost just forgot, you guys don't make this mistake at home. We need to put the washer back on here. Alright, I'm going to pick this up for a better view for me so I can see what I'm doing, but you guys, I'll try to talk you through it. So with this clip knot in the back, you can take your three fingers here, and have one on the nuts, because the nuts, they're machined very well. They do slide in and out though, so they can fall out, so then you're gonna have to start the process over. So just take 3 fingers on the back side and make sure the nuts don't fall out. So we're all lined up there, and our stop pin is lined up. So we're looking pretty good shape right now. So what I'm gonna do just to get started is just lightly thread in the clip screws, or excuse me, the scale screws, just so the nut's not going to fall out. Then I can pay more attention to the pivot. All right, so we got those started, so we're not going to lose any pieces here. So now I'm just making sure I have my washer lined up. So I'm just looking from the side here. Stop pin is in the recess, so we're looking good there. And this is where you would normally put a small dab of blue Loctite on your new pivot, or on your old pivot. Since you did remove it, it would still be recommended to put a small dab of blue Loctite on there. So we're just going to start hand tightening this just to begin with, until we need the spanner wrench in the back. All right, so we're looking good there. So I'm going to just tighten down the scale screws. And you don't need to put a ton of torque on this. If you are replacing with titanium scale screws, you know, if you over torque them, you can shear the heads off of the titanium ones. I've seen that a couple times before, so just be careful. You don't need to go overboard. So we're going to put the spanner wrench on the back again. I'm going to turn. So right now, with me fiddling with it, it went to a position that I don't particularly like. So I'm just going to take the spanner wrench and turn it where it's easier for me to hold, which is in the vertical position here on the back. That way I can have 2 fingers on the wrench, and my pinky finger can keep it off the lock side so it doesn't scratch. Alright, so right now it's still too loose. It's just barely wants to touch the scale. So it's definitely too loose still. And since you are disassembling the knife, you're just going to need to play with it. Since you are taking the factory assembly and adjusting it. So they do adjust it from the factory. So if you under tighten this, it's not going to be centered. And if you over tighten this, you're going to make it so the knife can barely move. And I'll just show you that right away. I'll tighten this down very tight, and it's going to basically make this a two-handed knife. So you can see there, it's really hard to pull the blade out. So then you know you've gone too far. So now it's just kind of fine-tuning the knife. That's where the Loctite comes in handy. So once you do get it set, you just let the Loctite dry. I typically recommend that overnight. And with this being, if you have a flipper, it is easier because you know how you like it to flip. So this is a non-flipper variant. So the centering is still off a little bit. So this, with this being a non-flipper, it is just a little bit harder to gauge the blade. So I do need to go a little bit tighter to bring the blade where it should be. All right, so it's a little bit too loose. You can see the knife almost dropped on my finger there, so you just got to play with it. All right, so you can see we got it in the optimal position. Very well centered, not overly tight to open. It doesn't just freely drop with any blade play. And with it being a non-flipper, you can still easily open it one-handed. So we are in good shape. So once you put the Loctite on there, now just don't fiddle with the pivot and just let it dry. So last thing, we're going to take our 50 thousandths Allen wrench and remove the screw for the Lockbar Stabilizer. So most of the Hinderer Lockbar Stabilizers include a new screw. Just probably because it's so small, you could easily mess that one up. So I didn't, but I'm still going to replace it with the new one. So drop the stabilizer in and keep track of your screw. I'm just going to put it right on the bit out of the gate. And tighten that down. So with this, you will have to be relatively careful. A 50 thou hex wrench is relatively small, and you don't need to torque overly torque this. And we're going to throw the pocket clip back on it. And I guess before you do that, so we'll go over all the parts just so you can see them easier without the pocket clip covering the stabilizer. So we have the pivot screws replaced, the scale screws replaced. We got the new standoffs in there, and our new scale. And if you wanted to, all the Hinderers out of the box, they do come tip down carry, as you can see here. But the filler tab on this side is made to come out and swap so you can carry tip up. Then you would just take the filler tab here and put it in the slot here. But there you have it. That is a Hinderer XM-18 3.5 inch version with all of the parts replaced. So pretty easy to do, just takes a little bit of time here. But for the first time, it takes a little bit longer. But if you have a variety of knives, it makes it easier. And one other thing to note, guys, you don't have to put the nuts in from this way. That is how it comes from the factory. There are some Hinderer factory engraved, so they'll have a little, so there's like dog paws and other kind of cool stuff on this side. You can, for visual purposes, put those in from the front side, then use the screws on the back. So those you can flip-flop from side to side depending on what the look is that you're going for. So just keep that in mind. Otherwise, pretty straightforward. And if you guys have any questions on this knife or any other knives, feel free to post in the comments below, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thanks for watching.